bottom of a two-part pitcher. It's going to be a round globe kind of shape. And what I like to do when I'm going to throw a round pot is I like to bring the clay up into a tall, narrow cylinder, and then after it's up, I belly it out. So I'm pushing down, keeping my hands in this stable centering position. I push down as far as I can. Then I push down to the right level for the base, and then pull flat and straight across. And then you need to go back and forth until you really have the base well compressed. It's easy to explain that when you make a bowl, the inside shape is what matters, because you're going to trim the outside. So the inside, you want to get that nice continuing curve on the inside. That's not as clear to people when they're beginning to make pots, that the same is true of a cylinder. That really the inside dimension is what matters the most. You can modify the outside, but you can't ever get back in there to change the inside. So right now, I've already decided how wide the base of this pitcher is going to be. So get the clay wet, get back into your centering position, and push up and in. And you've got to have your hand on the inside so that there's an equal and opposite pressure. The way this works, the wheel wants to make the clay go out, so your job in trying to bring it up tall is to keep the clay in. If you haven't gotten it far enough in to suit you, you can do this thing called collaring, where you bring it narrower. Then the next thing I do is I create an undercut and grab. The pressure is going to be against my finger here, my thumb here, and my hands on the inside. And they're not exactly opposite each other. There's like a little stair step between. People, when they're learning to throw tall cylinders or taller cylindrical forms, make a mistake when they start out too quickly into the eventual shape they want. That I've gotten it now in my mind where it's really a two-part thing. The first part is creating an even wall and moving that clay up that wall. And the second part is making the form you want. They're not completely separate, but they're far more separate than you initially think they want to be. Now, I'm trying to maintain that inside dimension that I set to begin with. And so what's happening is that the outside is narrowing as I pull this clay up the wall. Every time you do this, you use a little bit slower wheel and a little bit less hard grip. And when you get to the top, you steady your rim. Now I'm going to start making this into a globe shape. The reason to do all this pulling up before you start to push out is that it's much harder to pull clay up a wall if it's not vertical. Okay, this time I'm going to start using a rib, which is a wooden tool. Named rib, I'm told, because they were originally made from animals' ribs. That's the potter's urban legend. Many of the forms that I make are very simple because I'm interested in the sphere, or I'm interested in the line of a pot. I make these larger pitchers in two parts, mostly so that they'll be light enough to pour, but also because it's important to me when you come up to a change of direction, I like it to be clearly a change of direction, and that's easier to get if your bottom has hardened, the bottom of your pot is hardened up a bit before you're adding the top part. When you're trying to pull the clay up, you don't want your inside hand and your outside hand to be opposite each other. When you're making the form and you're not trying to stretch the clay, you do want them opposite each other. You get that contact and then you push out. I'm not putting much pressure. It's a fairly small amount of pressure. That's the bottom of the pitcher. This is the pot I made earlier, and it is still pretty soft. Getting the timing right on things like this is really critical. I think that's half of figuring out how to be a potter, is figuring out how hard or soft the clay should be for any given process. And I'm going to throw a second piece on top of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is score the top, get it wet, score it up, and then measure it and put it aside. Then I'm going to throw a ring of clay to go on here and then throw the top in place. I'm going to throw a ring of clay that will fit that measurement and then cut it off and then plop it on top of that bottom and attach it. So I've got that centered now, and I'm going to get a rough measurement. I'm going to push down and create a ring. If I were making these individually, I would probably go for about half the weight of the bottom. So if it's a 6-pound bottom, I'd probably do a 3-pound ball of clay as a rough guess. There are a couple of nice reasons to work in two parts like this. One is that it allows one to make bigger pots than you can otherwise make. I do at some point reach my natural limit of how much I can center and throw, and if you work in pieces, you can get bigger than that natural limit.